Jeffrey Epstein is a financier, educator, business consultant for the elite, and just a great guy, as well as someone who prefers younger company, owner of an island, someone who lured girls there, a tough manipulator, and much, much more. Only the lazy haven't heard about him and his files. And from them, it almost seems like the global elite practically have infants for breakfast, and more details keep emerging, each one more horrifying than the last. So it turns out that almost everyone has heard something about Epstein's files and that there's something harsh and bloody, but very few people actually have any idea what's really in those files. And now it's unclear whether we've uncovered some disgusting secret of the global backstage, or if we shouldn't trust everything that's written and shown on the internet. Let's try to figure it out. Epstein's name appeared in Soviet chronicles a long time ago, and his face could be seen in photos with billionaires and politicians for almost 30 years. Epstein's friends were presidents, princes, bankers, and philanthropists, the global elite, ready to trust him with their money and turn a blind eye to what was happening on his island, which is now called the Island of Misfortune. Back in 2005, it became clear that behind the mask of a great guy was a cynical man with a preference for younger girls, literally buying teenage girls. But it was only in 2018 that Epstein faced serious charges, which he escaped by taking his own life in prison at the height of the scandal. Today, almost 8 years later, his case has once again attracted widespread attention as new shocking details have come to light, or at least the possibility to exaggerate and fabricate such details. Due to the release of a huge number of files in January and February 2026, the United States Department of Justice published a massive collection of previously classified redacted documents, emails, photos, and videos related to the FBI and Department of Justice investigations against Epstein and his associates. The files were released, and that's when it all started. In total, there were more than 3 million pages of texts, thousands of photos and videos, as well as Epstein's correspondence with influential people, including world political and business leaders. 6 million pages of documents telling the story of many years of life, many of whom are still afraid to reveal their names openly. The public outcry surrounding the case is enormous. In Epstein's correspondence, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, Putin, and many others are mentioned. Raw versions of documents with the names and contacts of Epstein's victims have leaked online, including potentially hundreds or even thousands of names. It is impossible to reliably determine the true scale of his crimes. One thing is clear, this man knew the global elite well and knew how to win people over. He also loved women, considered them a source of pleasure, and wasn't shy about paying for that pleasure. So who exactly was Jeffrey Epstein? He was born in 1953 in Brooklyn, New York, to an ordinary middle-class family. Then at the Current Institute at New York University. Jeffrey dreamed of becoming a mathematician and rich since childhood, and he had the abilities, but he didn't have a diploma. However, that didn't stop him from first working as a teacher at a private school, and in 1976 he got a job at a major investment bank, which is where his path to the top began. At the job interview, Jeffrey lied that he had 2 diplomas from prestigious universities. They took his word for it and hired him, but by the time the deception was discovered, it was already too late. Even Epstein himself honestly said, "I knew that you needed diplomas to get such a prestigious job." Well, what can you do? You just have to learn how to apply and go through interviews. They didn't fire Epstein because, despite not having diplomas, he really did his job well. Besides, he was charming and charismatic. He quickly found a way to connect with clients, and it was easy for him to convince people to invest their money. Jeffrey is a great guy, he knows his stuff, people said about him. At the same time, Epstein wasn't shy about spending corporate funds on personal needs. He flew business class on business trips, stayed in the best hotels, and bought expensive jewelry for his girlfriend. After another embezzlement, Epstein was offered to win back to pay a fine. Feeling offended, he quit, but he didn't give up his financial activities. At his first job in an investment company, he met major clients. In the 1980s, he started his own financial enterprise, although the details of his client base and sources of capital remain unclear. Epstein creates a closed network of investors, offering them exclusive investment opportunities, often without fully disclosing the details of the projects. Clients eagerly gave Epstein millions of dollars. Projects often failed, and the money disappeared without a trace. But the scheme continued to work, and Epstein himself grew richer. In his little black book of contacts, which would later become important evidence in the case, appeared the names of major politicians and media personalities. Epstein quickly realized that he didn't need to give people real profits to make them trust him. The main thing was to make them feel special, and that was something he was good at. People brought him money because they saw billionaires, Nobel laureates, former presidents, and princes appearing by his side. That means the elite trust this man, so now I belong to that elite too, since he decided to share an investment with me, one for the chosen few, the clients were sure. And Jeffrey, he's a nice guy. Someone with a smile like that wouldn't deceive you. Very few people wanted to admit failure. Epstein knew how to persuade a tough market. The project needs time, the strategy is too advanced, and people just didn't understand the project. Patting his business partner on the shoulder, the financier suggested having a glass of good wine and relaxing with a beautiful woman. Fortunately, there were plenty of beautiful women around, and Epstein had a place where he could have fun with them without being seen by anyone unnecessary. Epstein owned estates in various places, including Miami and New York. And of course the infamous island, one of the Virgin Islands that are part of United States territory. On this truly paradise-like island, although some witnesses describe it as rather shabby away from prying eyes, Epstein hosted private parties for his circle, and for a while no one knew that at these parties teenage girls would be offered as entertainment for the guests. It would later turn out that Epstein gathered them from all over the world. Victoria's Secret models, just beautiful girls he noticed somewhere and wanted. In his files there was a whole international mix. Russians, Moldovans, Americans, French women, Germans. He constantly needed fresh faces. He was always looking for something new. When Epstein's files appear online in January 2026, a huge number of girls and women will find themselves on his lists and will be very surprised. Some of them didn't even know they were being considered or that someone was planning to order them. They say Epstein divided people into two categories: men, billionaires, bankers, politicians, leaders, those who should be respected and kept close because they are a source of power and influence, and women, additions, appendages, service staff in beautiful dresses and with pretty faces. Women often irritated Epstein with their imperfections, and he didn't hide it. You should think about getting your nose reduced before you turn 23, he writes to some girl in July 2017. Take a selfie of your genitals and send it to me, he writes to another. They say that with women, Epstein didn't discuss anything except intimacy and entertainment. His assistant, Leslie Groff, who was responsible for organizing the parties, clearly knew her place and her role. She made sure that the American economist Larry Summers had plenty of snacks prepared, that Bill Clinton was always served Chardonnay, and that everything looked as if it required no effort at all. While she is corresponding with Bill Gates' assistant about his culinary preferences, Epstein is exchanging messages with his friend, the Emirati businessman Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem. Here's an example from their correspondence in November 2013. Sulayem writes, "By the way, the Ukrainian and the Moldovan have arrived. The Moldovan is a complete disappointment. She's not nearly as beautiful as in the photo." Epstein replies, "Photoshop." Sulayem responds, "Not just that, she's also short and skinny." The friends, in a purely male way, wish Epstein lots of pee, hinting at something unclear, but seemingly referring to female genitalia. Happy birthday. Wishing you health, happiness, and lots of pee. Happy New Year. May you have lots of money and pee in the coming year. A woman in Epstein's files is nothing more than an intimate toy, bought in a store and thrown away after use. It feels like there was only one woman in Epstein's life whom he treated with respect and as an equal, Ghislaine Maxwell. By the way, I used to have a portable single burner stove for a long time, also called Maxwell. This woman played a special role in the Epstein case. Ghislaine Maxwell is a British socialite, the daughter of media mogul Robert Maxwell, a close friend and longtime partner of Jeffrey Epstein. She helped him find girls for his entertainment and actively involved them in sexual activities. With him, everything usually happened according to a well-rehearsed scheme. First, she would get acquainted with the girls, often teenagers from vulnerable backgrounds, and build a trusting relationship with them. Maxwell knew how to win people over. She seemed friendly, like an older friend who wanted to help. Don't be afraid of anything. He's a good person. You just give a massage, get paid, and calmly go home, she assured them. I'll be here nearby in the next room. When Epstein started bothering his masseuse, Maxwell was there again, right there. There's nothing wrong with this, it's just a service. No one is forcing you, of course. You can leave if you want. I can stay here if that makes you feel more comfortable. Maxwell was personally present during the sexual acts and in some cases participated in them. She was also the one who rewarded the girls, bought them gifts, and gave them money for bringing their friends. She was the bridge between the world of the elite and the world of the victims. Epstein attracted with status and money while she offered safety and feminine trust. It's a classic cynical scheme. When evil speaks in a soft voice and smiles, people believe it more quickly. In 2021, Maxwell was sentenced to 20 years in prison. She still denies her guilt, calls herself a scapegoat, and claims she didn't know anything. The court didn't believe these arguments, and neither did the jury. The first warning bell for Jeffrey Epstein rang back in March 2005 when the Palm Beach police in Florida began investigating a case of abuse of a 14-year-old girl in Epstein's mansion. Later, other girls of about the same age would also give their testimonies. They all would say that Epstein invited them to his mansion so they could give him a massage. During the massage, Epstein would usually pleasure himself and touch the girls during the massage. They were often offered sex, paid $300 per session, and sometimes given an iPod or some kind of jewelry as an extra gift. For many, that was a huge amount of money. The girls kept coming back to the mansion again and again. In 2006, the Palm Beach authorities officially charged Jeffrey Epstein with multiple counts of sexual contact with underage girls. He was facing real prison time, but the case was unexpectedly handed over to a grand jury, and that changed everything. We all remember how charming Epstein was. In June 2006, Epstein was arrested, but only on a single charge of solicitation of prostitution. Society was immediately stirred up by a wave of outrage. How could this be with so many testimonies, yet nothing was ultimately brought against the criminal? But connections and money, as is often the case, decided everything. The chief prosecutor of the district, Barry Krischer, was immediately accused of giving special treatment to the suspect. The FBI began an investigation. It seemed that since the feds took on the case, now the criminal would be punished. But in 2007, Epstein's lawyers began lengthy negotiations with the United States Attorney in Miami, Alexander Acosta. They did everything they could to delay the investigation and claimed that the girls had simply made false accusations against their client. He couldn't be punished with real jail time for a fabricated accusation. In June 2008, Epstein was finally found guilty on 2 counts: soliciting prostitution and soliciting prostitution from persons under 18. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison, but Epstein managed to make a deal with the prosecutor, and the punishment was essentially just a formality. During the day, Epstein would leave the prison to go to his office and only return to his cell to spend the night. The deal also concealed the names of other individuals involved and guaranteed immunity for many accomplices, which later sparked intense criticism. In July 2009, that is, after 13 months instead of 18, Epstein was released. In the following 10 years, hundreds of women who were his victims would try to reach out to the authorities to seek real punishment for the criminal. One of these women was Virginia Giuffre, née Roberts. Like many of Epstein's victims, she came from a troubled family, there was not enough money, and from her teenage years, she was forced to work. In 2000, when she was 16, Virginia was working at the spa of a club that at the time belonged to Donald Trump in Palm Beach, Florida. There she met Maxwell, who noticed the attractive girl with obvious financial problems and offered her a job as a masseuse for Epstein. Virginia agreed. According to Giuffre, all of this quickly turned into sexual exploitation. Within a year, she was not only forced to have intimate relations with Epstein, but was also passed on to his influential acquaintances around the world. In one of her interviews, Giuffre said, "Imagine you come to a friend's house with a bottle of champagne. So I was like the bottle of champagne, everyone present drank from me, and I couldn't say no." She claimed that she was taken to different countries, including the United Kingdom, Epstein's private island, and other places. They flew on Epstein's private plane, which was cynically called the Lolita Express. Giuffre described in detail the psychological pressure, intimidation, and abuse from Epstein and Maxwell. According to her, she was afraid she would die a slave, and she had no one to turn to for protection, just like many others. The most high-profile accusation made by Giuffre is connected to the name of former Prince Andrew, the younger brother of King Charles III of the United Kingdom. At one time, he was a member of the royal family, but after the Epstein scandal, he was gradually removed from public duties. Giuffre played a key role in this. In 2011, photos of the former prince with Virginia appeared in the media, who at that time was actively testifying against Epstein. She claimed that Epstein and Maxwell arranged for her to be intimate with the prince 3 times, in London, in New York, and on the island, when she was 17. In the photo taken in 2001, Andrew is hugging Virginia by the waist and Maxwell is standing next to them. The authenticity of the photo was later confirmed. The scandal in the royal family was loud. Andrew was not convicted of crimes related to Epstein, but the publicity had serious consequences for his status. So, in October 2025, he renounced the title of Duke of York and his membership in the Order of the Garter, and then he was stripped of his royal titles, at the initiative of King Charles III. He was also ordered to live in Royal Lodge, which is a 30-room mansion next to Windsor Castle. He is still under pressure from the public and the media because of the accusations and questions about his behavior. In the past, Andre always denied the accusations and meetings with Giuffre, but in 2022, he paid her a large settlement without a trial in February 2026. Epstein's files appeared online, among which was an invitation from the prince to have dinner with him at Buckingham Palace, as well as letters from Sarah Ferguson, Andre's ex-wife, in which she calls Epstein a legend, and the brother I always dreamed of. But the biggest stir was caused by a photo of Andre kneeling with a smirk on his face next to a woman lying on the floor. In February 2026, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer stated that Andre should testify before the United States Congress if he has information about Epstein's affairs, but there has been no official response from the former prince yet. Sources are confident he will refuse. There's already plenty of dirt around him. Well, we'll see how things turn out. Virginia also spoke about other clients, mentioning prime ministers and politicians in her memoirs, but she didn't always name names. Virginia founded an organization that helps victims of similar schemes, gave interviews, filed lawsuits, and inspired other victims to speak out. Society responded to her in various ways. Some sympathized, while others accused her of seeking personal gain, fabricating stories, and profiting from it. But over years of investigations, her key claims did not fall apart, and many details were indirectly confirmed by flights, photographs, coincidences with other testimonies and documents. Virginia got married, had 3 children, but she never really recovered from what happened. On April 25, 2025, she took her own life in Australia. She was 41 years old. Unfortunately, due to YouTube censorship, I can't show some documentary materials, so I will leave them out. Go to the Telegram channel Strashnoti, subscribe and watch. The link is under the video. After her death, the memoirs Nobody's Girl were published. They became a bestseller and sparked a new wave of discussions. Virginia was one of many who tried to seek justice, and at the same time one of the few who dared to reveal her face and name. Many victims hid behind online anonymity. They are mentioned without last names: Sarah K., Leslie V., and Jane Doe. These are collective names for an unknown or anonymous victim. There are hundreds of such Jane Does around the world. Jeffrey Epstein was on close terms with members of the global elite. Numerous photos captured him with celebrities, politicians, and billionaires. There are also photos of Epstein and Maxwell. In the company of actor Kevin Spacey, singer Mick Jagger, magician David Copperfield, pop stars Michael Jackson and Diana Ross. Of course, not all of them were participants in his parties with younger girls. The very fact of appearing in Epstein's files, and those files contain all sorts of things, is not proof, but for some, it's a serious blow to their reputation regardless. Bill Clinton, the former United States president, flew on Epstein's plane, the Lolita Express, several times, but publicly stated that he had never been to Epstein's private islands. There is also no evidence of involvement in Epstein's criminal activities. Bill Gates met and communicated with Epstein even after Jeffrey's reputation was already ruined. They discussed charitable projects, but formally Epstein did not participate in the activities of Gates's foundations, and there is also no evidence of Gates's involvement in Epstein's crimes. Elon Musk once wrote to Epstein, "So when will there be the wildest party on his island?" But he never actually visited the island and never had close contact with Epstein. United States President Donald Trump is mentioned in Epstein's files about 3,000 times. When this became known, many media outlets immediately started promoting the theory of Trump's involvement in Epstein's crimes. However, at present there is no indisputable evidence of this. And take Putin, for example. He is mentioned 1,054 times in these files because Epstein's files are 6 million pages long and mention everything under the sun. It's possible that there will be a mention that the Earth is flat, but that doesn't mean the Earth is actually flat or not. Nevertheless, Trump and Epstein had known each other since the 90s. They appeared together at social events and were seen in photos and videos from parties, both in New York and in Palm Beach at different times. In a 2002 interview, Trump called Epstein a terrific guy and noted that they had a good time together. He also wrote that Jeffrey is the only person who can win someone over just by saying his name. According to his own words, Trump stopped communicating with Epstein back in the early 2000s before the main legal prosecution began. The files generally confirm this. In 2016, a woman filed a complaint against Trump, claiming that he assaulted her when she was only 13. At Epstein's party in 1994, according to her, Epstein was allegedly angry because Trump took her virginity. The lawsuit was filed and withdrawn in 2016 without evidence and without further action. However, now for many media outlets, it has become a reason for speculation in 2024 during the election campaign. Model Stacey Williams made a public statement in the media. She claimed that she met Trump through Epstein in the early 1990s. The model stated that once, in 1993, Trump allegedly touched her body without consent, which she perceived as unwanted physical contact. Williams described it as part of a twisted game between him and Epstein. However, two circumstances are important here. First, at the time of the contact, Stacy was of legal age, and back then, by the way, she did not file any lawsuits. And secondly, she was unable to support her accusations with any additional evidence. The Trump administration denied the accusations, the case never went to court, and no official charges were filed. Virginia Giuffre never accused Trump of sexual assault. She said that he was very friendly when they met, and that Trump was not involved in anything bad in her memoirs and interviews. Trump is not on the list of those she was handed over to. Trump himself even said in 2025 that Epstein stole her and other girls from his spa, and that this was one of the reasons for their falling out. At the same time, some experts suggested that Epstein was not so much corresponding with Trump in these files as he was gathering information on him, supposedly for blackmail, just as he did with many of his other friends. Trump himself stated that Epstein never blackmailed him, but the theory is still alive. Some media claim that Epstein provided information about his friends to the KGB or Israeli intelligence, but of course, there is no undeniable evidence of this either. Nevertheless, in November 2018, the Miami Herald published an article about the Epstein case in connection with Alexander Acosta, who was then working in the Trump administration. Journalists drew attention to the oddity of Epstein receiving an unusually light sentence, and this once again brought public attention to the financier. In July 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was arrested on charges of human trafficking when investigators in New York concluded that the 2008 plea deal did not apply to these cases, and Acosta was forced to resign from his position. Amid public outrage, the investigation became increasingly large-scale. In August 2019, just a month after his arrest, Epstein was found dead in his cell at a federal prison in New York. The official version is that he committed suicide by mechanical asphyxiation, especially since he had tried to do it before. However, the news was reported in the press as far from straightforward, and there were, in fact, reasons for that. Since Epstein had already attempted to take his own life, he was placed under stricter surveillance. They installed video cameras and increased the security post, but as it turned out later, on the night of Epstein's death, some of the cameras were not working, and recordings from some of them had supposedly disappeared. The guards admitted that they hadn't checked the video cameras and that some of the reports had been falsified. But it's important to understand that a lack of budget and staff is a major problem in American prisons. In the prison where Epstein was held, there was a 30% staff shortage, and one of the two guards on duty that day was working his 5th shift in a row. Well, under such circumstances, it's probably not surprising that people were careless about their work, were too lazy to check things extra times, and so they falsified reports. But conspiracy theorists keep trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Nevertheless, despite a number of suspicious circumstances, it seems that Epstein took his own life, and even more so, he really died and did not fake his death. And he didn't secretly fly away to live on a distant island as if he didn't already have his own islands, or to Israel. Basically, he didn't go anywhere, he just died. Epstein's death did not stop the investigation. Even though they no longer had the main suspect, his active accomplice in the crime was still available. In July 2020, Maxwell was charged with sex trafficking, conspiracy, and transporting individuals under 18 for illegal sexual exploitation. In 2022, she was sentenced to 20 years in prison. In January 2024, interest in the Epstein case was reignited after judges opened access to thousands of court records and civil cases filed by some of his victims. It turned out that all this information was already available, but the public kept demanding more and more. There were reports about Epstein's client list supposedly being hidden from the general public, and later this would be refuted. In July 2025, the Wall Street Journal published an article with hints about a letter with intimate undertones that was allegedly written by Donald Trump to Epstein on his 50th birthday. The very next day, Trump sued the publication, calling the letter fake, disgusting, and humiliating. The Trump administration filed a request in court to declassify parts of Epstein's documents to ease political tensions around the world, but they were denied. And only in January 2026 were millions of Epstein's files made available to anyone who wanted them. And since people had been waiting for so long, they started digging like crazy and clinging to any text they could find. And a new wave of scandals swept across the world, probably the loudest so far, especially in France. The well-known politician Jacques Lang, former Minister of Culture under François Mitterrand, resigned from his position as head of the Arab World Institute, after his name was mentioned more than 600 times in the files and became the subject of investigations into economic and tax matters. The publication of the files caused a strong reaction in British society. High-profile figures, including former Prince Andrei, were once again in the spotlight, and all this commotion damaged the reputation of elite circles in America. There have not yet been any direct resignations or criminal cases against major politicians. Democrats in Congress are threatening legal action against the Justice Department for attempts to conceal or edit materials, but threats like that are nothing new. Nevertheless, a part of the conspiracy-minded public is of course convinced that the authorities are hiding something. It would seem that recruitment, human trafficking involving people under 18 and a cover-up would be a sensation in itself, but that turned out to be not enough. Shocking headlines appeared online. Epstein and his friends are cannibals. Trump buried bodies on his golf courses. Some media outlets are actively discussing child eating and satanic rituals that were conducted on Epstein's infamous island. They talk about bodies found on the island and on the grounds of Epstein's mansion. One of the victims allegedly ran out of Epstein's estate wearing a t-shirt that said yum yum. There's a very popular video circulating online where a girl says like, it's disgusting, they eat people, they ate people. But the thing is, the video was filmed in Mexico. And if you watch not just the 10-second clip but the full 4-minute version, you can see that something is wrong with the girl, in the sense that she's saying nonsense and meaningless things. For example, she says that she was searching for freedom for a long time and finally became free, mentions some Mexican names, is rude to a hotel employee, and then says some more nonsense about Mexican police officers approaching her, including that they are involved in some terrible crimes. Then the woman is arrested and nothing more is known about her because nothing was known about her before this video either. None of Epstein's victims ever mentioned cannibalism, and no witness, investigator, or prosecutor ever mentioned such practices. The loudest source is an anonymous FBI interview. Well, it's a conversation like an interrogation. So the anonymous FBI interview from 2019 with an unknown man who allegedly was on Epstein's yacht in 2000 and witnessed ritual sacrifices, dismembered infants, the removal of intestines, and the eating of feces from those intestines, not meat, but specifically excrement. Among the guests were the Trumps and the Bushes. All these politicians allegedly abused the victim, and all of this happened at a big satanic orgy, but this man did not provide any evidence. Moreover, he says he didn't remember these events until 2016 and claims he recovered the memories during therapy. How convenient. This coincided in timing with Trump becoming president after that until 2019. The man didn't tell anyone about what happened. The FBI agents interviewing the man noted in their report that he was unable to provide any evidence whatsoever to support his claims, nor could he point to any other witnesses who could in any way confirm his observations. On the contrary, there are even circumstances that contradict the informant's statements. This witness also told the agents that he uses marijuana and hallucinogenic mushrooms and that he remembers what happened only vaguely because he was under the influence of something. In the report, the investigator noted that the alleged victim appeared emotionally unstable during the conversation. However, conspiracy theorists of course don't care anyway. It's pretty much the same with all the trashy stories supposedly taken from Epstein's files. Epstein's files are just a collection of all sorts of things. There's so little to hold on to in them that no cases have been opened, and the only proven guilty parties have long been known. So don't believe everything you read on the internet, even if it supposedly came from Epstein's files. There was all sorts of stuff in those files. And also share your valuable opinion in the comments, watch other videos on the channel, and visit Boosty or Patreon. Actually, I also post free videos there. You can just go and watch free videos. There are both paid and free ones. And also join Telegram, where I'll share additional sources and materials about Epstein's files.